Welcome to the No Show. My name's Andrea Edwards.
My name's Tim Wade.
And my name is Joe Augustine. People struggle to talk about what the No Show is about. While you struggle, I'm going to do the one thing that we're not supposed to do at the start of it, which is get you to go to subscribe, like, do all that kind of stuff to share with social media on the off chance that you might like what you're going to hear and want to share about it and forget about doing it later on, right? So the deal is very simple. After you watch the whole thing, if you don't like it, send it back to the kitchen. So the No Show is about the world, what's been happening. It's got all the stuff that I kind of super hashtagged in my post on LinkedIn. We try and talk about the world, everything that's happened, the life that you know, the world that we know, the climate, the economy, all the kind of stuff. And we try to do it all in an hour, and we always fail.
Fail.
Yeah. Impossible at this point.
Yes. So our fearless leader is to the left of your screen, Andrea Edwards. She spends a lot of time writing and thinking about stuff. And we're going to start the show with something a little bit different, right? And it's a perspective I think anybody who's outside of Singapore would be quite curious about. And in fact, I'm sure people have said some things to you, Andrea, about it before already about this. You've just put your son into national service in Singapore.
Yes.
Why?
And it's amazing. I'm actually putting an FAQ together because I'm getting asked so many questions about it. And some people are horrified, which I find really interesting that we put our sons through this. So we're permanent residents of Singapore, and that's part of the obligation. And we knew that when we signed up for it. Over the years, we've talked to the boys about it pretty consistently. And, there's been the, why did you do that to me sort of conversations. But it's something that I think is really, really important. And it's actually something I think the rest of the world could learn from. So the first thing is, for me, it's about, so I was in the Australian military. I did basic training, and for my whole life, while it wasn't a pleasant experience, I valued what I got from it. And there's lots of things that you get from it. But I have 3 missions for my boys. I want them to learn how to fight, how to shoot, and how to grow food. And I've said that for a long time. I've said it on the show before. And the reason is I can see the future that's coming. And I think there's some skills that we've lost that we need to get back. And that's, self-sufficiency and the ability to protect yourself is one. So having that military training in the mix, I think, is a good thing. The second thing that's always really impressed me, every time I go to a wedding in Singapore, there's always a couple of tables at the back where the old fellas sit, and they're all drinking whiskey and having a really good time. It's always multicultural. And they're NS buddies. And they served 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago of granddads in the room, right? And it's incredible to me that the bond. And one of the big issues in the world is social cohesion. So our societies are falling apart. And so to me, national service, and we could recreate the concept of national service in a different way. Like, I'd like to see an environmental service where when kids graduate from school, they go and serve their country for 2 years, and they replenish the land, and they get educated on, basic survival skills and all that sort of stuff. So social cohesion, bringing our societies back together. So that's another thing that I really, really value about it. And the final thing is the ability to work with anyone. So I'd graduated uni when I went into basic training in Australia. So I was the highest educated person in my platoon, and there were people that hadn't even graduated from year 10. And so the level of knowledge and understanding and, intellectual abilities really, really varied, and you had to work together as a team. And, Lexi's really, really struggling with Singlish. You can imagine it, right? He's also having an interesting experience with the food. He every now and again, he'll just eat anything. And he goes, oh, sometimes, Mum, there's vomit in my mouth afterwards. And we're just having such a giggle because he's trying everything. Whereas my next son, who's got to go in, he's not going to enjoy that. Like that fried rice with little tiny fish in it, whatever, white bait or whatever it's called. Oh, yeah, he's not a fan, but he's got to eat. And he's learning that food is fuel, not a luxury, right? So it's good. And he got off to a rough start for about 48 hours, but now he's ringing us every night, and he's enjoying it, especially when they're out doing physical things. He gets bored if he has to sit in a room and learn something. So it's good.
Cool.
I recommend it.
Good that he's doing well.
Yeah.
Well, I like that we heard about that. I think we just got the most controversial thing on today's show out of the way.
Fried rice.
Yeah.
Well, I'm actually curious for me to try and understand a little bit more about your perspective, right? Because you signed up for the
Yeah.
military yourself. Okay, so what made you do that? Why were you drawn to that?
I play the euphonium. I played, not play. I haven't picked it up since I left the army because it kind of killed my passion for music. But the euphonium is like a small tuba, and there's not very many professional opportunities for the euphonium. It's basically the military or the police band, and
Right.
the army really chased me to recruit me for a position, and I just went. I was finishing uni. I did music and ancient history. I didn't have any options, and I thought, oh, all right. I always thought I'd be in uniform at some point, so might as well give it a go. So that's why.
And have they ever
Yeah.
used you in the battlefield? I mean, I never heard the cry, incoming euphonium.
So that's why every no matter what you do, everyone has to do basic training, so you can always be called up. But
Right.
where the musicians are part of the the community that lift the spirits, right? So, but
Right.
the second Iraq war, Gulf War, was supposed to be taking off when I was in basic training, and we were all put on alert that there was a potential. So it's not,
Wow.
it wasn't, yeah, that would not have been a good thing. So yeah,
No, I don't think they handle the euphonium very well over there.
you could beat someone to death with it. It's a chunky metal thing.
Okay, so we got the white lady sends her white children to NS story out of the way. Let's talk about the rest of the world.
Oh yeah.
Oh man. I was trying to explain today at this event. Oh, by the way, I don't normally dress like a Ronnie Chang
He does.
impersonator.
Don't let him bluff you.
Yeah, I was at a New Year celebration, Chinese New Year celebration thing at a friend's office, and someone asked me what the show is about, and I said, well, we're going to try to give an update on everything that's been happening in the world in terms of geopolitics, the economy, and also the environment. And I said that we've been off the air for quite a while, so we're going to try and summarize all of that in one show. And
Yeah.
they said, you can do that? I said, no, there's no way we can do that.
We barely can do it
give
when
it a go.
we're 2 weeks apart. Now we're like 2 months for the break. This is like beginning of the latest season.
It's good
Man,
to have a break,
especially when
isn't
you've
it?
got especially when you've got that creator in chief at the heart of it all, right? I mean, that's just the craziness of it all. It's TikTok by presidency, right?
Yeah.
I didn't know who we were talking about then. I thought we were talking about Andrea, actually, for the first little bit. A curator in chief, yes.
Yeah, not creator.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, we're going to do things a little bit differently, a little bit more freewheeling. So basically, before Trump obviously was inaugurated, and since, I've been keeping a very close eye on what's going on, and the title is the zone has been flooded with shit, which is obviously a Steve Bannon line. And bizarrely, he said a couple of things that I've agreed with in the last few months, which is kind of bizarre to me. But it really has. And everyone I'm talking to is just so overwhelmed by what's going on, and they're just completely checking out, which to me is even more dangerous that we're checking out. We've got to get checked in, because this story is so much bigger than most people understand. And I'm finding the media coverage and a lot of the leading thinkers that I've been following for a very long time, I don't think they're grasping the complexity of this story either. And sometimes I'll listen to someone I've been listening to for years, and I'm like, is that really your takeaway? Wow. Okay. Underestimating what's going on, not really understanding who we should be looking at. Everyone's looking at Trump, but I don't know if that's the right place to put our eyes. I think we're in I started my weekend reads a few weeks ago, and I said we've got a failure of imagination, and I was really talking about the planetary crisis. But I think what we're in now is another failure of imagination. It's where we could possibly go. So, I think we've got the big show that's going on, the big media show, and it's, executive order, executive order, executive order, and everyone's like, oh, and emotions are running high, and a lot of the commentary is very emotional. And we understand that, especially from people in America. Then you've got the real work that's being done behind the scenes, which is often are not in the media and not getting any attention. And of course, then you've got the global sort of response to it. And, for us, we're all sitting outside of the United States looking at this. And I know a lot of people in the United States who are talking to us, they're having an interesting experience. A lot of people feel incredibly embarrassed about being American, which, and I think that's been a feeling that's been growing for a long time. But yeah, our friends in the US are really suffering and don't like what's being done. So it's intellectually fascinating, morally terrifying, but I think there's a lot that we need to be considering here. So what about you guys when you sort of think of just these last sort of, 2 months, I suppose, even 2 weeks?
Well, okay, so the the thing is, first of all, I think our perspective, of many people's perspective of things, comes really from the media, right? Some, as in
Yeah.
like people who are trying to create content. Now, this includes mainstream media, but so it's not just about people trying to get attention and just explain away things, right? They're actually they have the objective of trying to get an audience. So I think what we see sometimes is this flummoxed kind of reaction from the side, and it's designed to be not fully. You don't want it to spoil the magic of the story, if you like, right? I mean, if you can fully understand why the other side is doing it and you can explain it, then what
Mm.
you do is you lose the room. You lose the people who want to come to watch that particular thing happening, right? So I think what we see actually is a kind of it's a kind of laziness, in the sense that a lot of traditional media, even as they put the word out, few of the people in traditional media are actually doing the serious deep work. So I think more people understand the big picture than people who are willing to say they understand the big picture are. I think if you understood the big picture, you are forced to come to a conclusion that some of this makes sense. And that's something which is, I think it's frightening for anyone in the media, or a media owner in the US especially, to come to terms with, right? You have to pick a side so much in the US that if you show the slightest sign of being on the other side or being open to it, you get practically canceled, right? I don't even remember the name of the Democrat senator, the guy who's famous for showing up in shorts and all that stuff as well. I mean,
Mm.
he's a Democrat, but he's open, and he's getting all kinds of pushback as well. And that's just for having an openness to what might be going on, and to try to see where to try and see where they want to go and see if they can help make it a better world.
Was it John Fetterman?
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Joe, I'm with you. Like, it's not just America, right? You look around the world, look what's going on in Europe and the elections, not in this region, thankfully, but apart from obviously Myanmar, but there is a big failing, and something radical needs to change. And there is radical change happening, but is it the right type of radical change? So that's the thing. It's like, like a lot of people are talking about, oh, is Trump going to boot Musk out? And I don't even think that's on the table. Like, if anyone's going to get booted out, it's Trump, because once they get established, like, Trump's just a figurehead, right? He obviously brought his MAGA supporters with him, but I think he's the one that's at the highest risk, and it would be very easy for them to push him out, and Vance comes in and takes over. And we know that he's Peter Thiel is a supporter behind Vance. They put him in power, right? So the people I'm looking at, keeping an eye on, is obviously Elon Musk, and trying to understand what he's doing. And it's very difficult to understand what's going on, right? We hear some stuff, the USAID stuff, but it's really hard. So Peter Thiel, then there's Brian Armstrong, Ben Horowitz, Mark Andreessen, David Sachs, and there's another guy called Balaji Srinivasan, and the philosopher is this guy called Curtis Yarvin, and they call him the philosopher, the prophet, and Lord Yarvin. Now, all of these people have been talking about exactly what's happening right now for a very, very long time. It's an open secret, right? They've been talking about what they plan to do if they have the opportunity. So, one of them is to create thousands of sovereign mini countries or mini cities, and one of them you might have heard is Praxis, which is a custom-built city, and it's basically going to be run by corporations as government. Crypto will be the currency, and there's no place for the poor, right? You can apply to be a virtual resident of Praxis right now. So it's an opt-in society. And basically the message that they've been saying for a long time is, as nation states fail, and as you've got the planetary collapse that we're seeing happening, nation states are failing. Network states become the inevitable, which to me it's a bit of a Mad Max sort of vision, but with nicer looking cities. So but this guy, have you guys, before I talk about the butterfly revolution, have you guys heard of all of these guys? Because sometimes when I say their names, most people go, who? Apart from Elon Musk.
Well, I'll fess up to saying, for me, the names specifically ring a who reply for me, but the concepts are not far from what I think about. Okay, I mean, before I go into where I lean, I'll talk about the ideas not being foreign to me. Some of the ideas being spoken about or discussed. Yeah, but I've got a take on this, which I was telling you was either gonna to get me cancelled again, or promoted to some kind of role in the cabinet for the U.S. at some point.
Yeah.
Well, you can have your own little city state, Augustine.
Yeah. I already live my life that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this guy Yavin, right? So Curtis Yavin, Lord Yavin. So he's got this concept which they call the butterfly revolution. So there's, I think, 7 or 8 campaign things. So the first is campaign on autocracy, and we all heard Donald Trump say, "I'll be a dictator on day one only," right? But the message is always that you're going to destroy an inefficient and broken system. That's at the center of the message, which we've heard time and time again. Next is purge the bureaucracy, and they use the acronym RAGE, retire all government employees. So, Trump, our plans to dismantle the deep state. And then long-term planning with employment opportunities. So they call it the LinkedIn page for Project 2025. So there's this page where you can go for government jobs, but you've got to obviously show that you're a true believer, and they also do training to get you ready for those jobs, right? So number 3, ignore the courts, and obviously the Supreme Court ruling where with presidential immunity sort of makes this all possible. And we saw what's the guy on the Supreme Court who's Clarence Thomas and his wife were in the Oval Office, I think just yesterday. This next one is co-opt Congress. So only pick leaders loyal to you. We're seeing that. Centralize police and government powers, shut down elite media and academic institutions. And, Trump's calling the universities hostile places. And I don't know if everyone, I really love my history, but when Persia fell, the first people to go or be persecuted were the intellectuals and the academics. So it's not a good sign. And then, of course, in the media, a lot of people are still talking about the fake media and all that sort of stuff. Journalists have lost their jobs if they're not Trump-approved media. They've left their jobs. But also, there's basically almost no left-leaning media left in the US, and anything like we've seen Politico, they've come up in the USAID, the funding that they've been getting. So that's going to be out. So, so the left-leaning media, so the other opinion, anyone that's going to challenge what's going on, they've already been pretty much squashed, right? And that's not good for any of us if you believe in democracy. And then, of course, the final thing is turn out your people. So we've got the January 6th insurrection, and those insurrectionists have been freed. So why would you free them? And the police unions turned against Trump because of that. But you're going to centralize the police and the government powers. So what's going to happen there? There's just within that, there could be quite a revolution. So that's the butterfly. What is it? The butterfly plan revolution. So that's if you look at what's happening, that's what's happening. So it's quite radical.
Yeah. Well, you
But
see,
who wins and who loses?
Yeah, what I see when I hear about something like this, right, is what we're trying to do is we also try to see what fits so that we can go like this describes that describes this or whatever it is, right? So there is a kind of overlap happening in terms of what is conveniently falling within the plan, the prescription of things, and then there's also it's like if there's a confluence really in terms of outcomes or desired outcomes for both sides, and for me, I think Trump isn't playing the book, but he's allowing the game to play this way because it's the way to win the game, right? So he's here to change the game or change the rules of the game so he can win the game, and he's not particularly concerned about the game after he's done winning the game, right? That's the kind of perspective that I see with that. The people that you talk about there, so Musk being one of them, they want to change the game. They really, really want to upset the board. They really believe it, and I think why they all came out with Trump this time is because they finally found that the one vehicle that was going to enable this thing, right? So if you talk about if you talk about everything they were talking about before about the whole reset, about what they wanted to do, you saw it and understood their frustration and said, "There's just no way this is going to happen. There's no way this can happen." And Trump literally is that once in a lifetime personality, character, politician uh, that provides that opportunity where this could happen. And
Absolutely.
so we're where we are right now. I was looking at all the money that was coming in and people talking about why would someone want to do that. It really is about that. And it's not necessarily, and this is the part where people may disagree vehemently with me about this, it's not necessarily for them to be able to do evil. It's it's about them wanting to do what they think should be the right way things are being done. If I posed this question today to someone, I said, "Okay, let's try and pretend all this is in Trump, right? All this is no Elon Musk in it. Let's try and pretend that Obama began some of these processes immediately after he came to power, and instead of trying to get the consensus going, he said, let's pretend Obama comes into office, coming in on Yes We Can, and says let's make America great again. Yes we can. And how do we do this? We're going to do some of these things. We're going to push really hard in these directions. It feels very different. It feels like a different story, because when Obama did that, Obama also got into office because he was railing against how things were, and then became how things were, right?
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing that I get people to think about. Like there really is something to it, as in the conditions for the need for something radical to happen were there before someone said, yeah, this radical solution or this radical possibility might be the way to do it. Now, where they are right now is really messy. I don't think it's fantastic at all, because but at the same time, there's some questions that I've asked people to think about, right? So there's a meme that's going around right now about Trump calling him the criminal in chief, right? I think COTUS. I'm not sure exactly what it's supposed to stand for, but the and I said, well, think about this idea right now. So you have these people who are trying to reboot. They're trying to get everything to start again. I mean, it's crazy that you would do this, right? The idea that you would bring in young people. I mean, some of the people that have come in to execute what's happening in government, for instance, they're just really young people. And I said, okay, let's go back in time and go to the founding of the United States as we know it, right? First of all, who were those people, right? And the name that would have been used to describe them as a group: criminals. They broke the law. They stole an administration from somebody else who was in charge, and they created their own stuff. How old were they? they're not the gray old men that we kind of imagine politics is about. They were young folks. They were some young idealistic men who wanted to get things done, and they got it going. And what did they do? They rebooted. They actually did something new again, and they knew it was going to go wrong. They knew that things were going to have to change, that it wasn't a perfect anything. But that's what they kind of were doing as well, right? So if we can change a little bit of our perspectives and try and imagine different characters, there's something about what's going on that is actually right, because it's upsetting something that isn't right either.
Mm.
Two things come to mind.
Yep.
Two things come to mind. One, Andrea, when you were talking about how he's playing, I think you were talking about how he was playing to win. And was that you talking about it, or was that with Joe at the beginning? I don't know. But he was talking about how Trump's playing to win, doesn't really care about the rules so much. He just wants to win and set it up for part two, whatever that is. So in the current system and rules, there is no part two for him, but it seems like the rules are changing. It reminded me immediately when you're talking about how he's playing to win by rewriting the rules of a Star Trek episode. No, it was a Star Trek movie, I think, where Kirk wins the no-win scenario in the Kobayashi Maru scene. I guess they go through a training simulator, and it's designed for the captain to try everything but still lose, so that they can face the feeling of impending defeat and death and know what that feels like. But he rewrites the program. he hacks into the program and rewrites it so he can win. And that was him thinking about how to that he had to win. That it was like there has to be a solution, and the solution was to rewrite the program. Another thing that actually came to mind while you were talking about it was the politics seems to be backwards and forwards between these two parties, who continually spend an awful lot of taxpayers' money and government effort undoing what the last administration did and putting in their own flavor of what the world is supposed to, well, what America is supposed to be like, and what the world is supposed to be like, made in America's image. And then the next administration comes in and goes, no, it's like this. And then they do it, and they've just been doing that for ages. That in one sense, it does make sense that somebody goes, okay, this has got to stop. And we kind of need to go, what do we really want this to look like? And we need to do that together. Unfortunately, they can't do it together because there's so much animosity, or the group has decided we don't want to do it together, and let's go in and rewrite the rules so we can win and make the other party irrelevant. Could be. And they've got a special mandate for the next 2 years where they run everything. They have all the votes everywhere, that they can pretty much do whatever they like, in a sense, so long as they're enacting a plan, it seems. And what it does feel like is that there have been a lot of plans drawn up over the last 4 years when they've been out of office.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why there's this tsunami of change happening now, because they got 2 years to bed it down before, if the elections happen, those, the House and the Senate have half of their people up for re-election. So but if you're brought in as a CEO of a business, and that business has been flip-flopping between two different strategies for the longest time, and quite frankly underperforming and sliding down, that the new CEO needs to come in and make a decision about how that strategy of flip-flopping can't happen anymore. And we need to have a particular course of action. What's scary is that we don't know what the course of action is until we see it playing out. And then we're in the confusion of the storm. But like you rightly said, there's a lot of people behind the scenes that you're trying to pay attention to. and not pay attention to the roof blowing off a house, but pay attention to which way the storm is moving. So there's a bit at work here, but I can understand why something needs to change. And I listened to his inauguration speech, which was, sort of outlining what he was going to do and how he was going to do it, and then sort of rallying everyone with a sort of motivating cry. But he really did. There was an element of it where, I mean, Joe talked about Obama. Obama created a sense of certainty amidst chaos when he gave people the hope that change was possible, and it was built on his strength of calm amidst the storm. Obama had this amazing sense of peace when he delivered, and in a sense of authority that it was possible. Trump is doing kind of the same thing, except without the peace part. He's coming across with a sense of authority, but from a tough guy, bullying sort of approach, rather than the Obama sort of calm approach. And so that, as he was saying, it was like, and of course, as any change manager knows, the most important thing when you've rallied the troops that we're going to implement this change, the most important thing is creating a sense of urgency and delivering quick wins. And so a lot of people are going, he's just playing to his supporters and everything else. But actually, he's also communicating to the rest of the nation that everything he said, he's starting to do it. And those, so I don't know if they're quick wins yet, but they're certainly quick actions. So it's fascinating to watch. I'm not necessarily agreeing with it. I'm observing it, trying not to get emotionally involved in the whole storm, and trying to sort of see what's happening here. Yeah.
I think that's a good idea, not to get emotionally involved in the whole storm. So, Joe, you sort of said, that you don't necessarily think they're evil. So we have always needed the world to understand that we need to radically transform how we run things, but it was never going to happen easily, especially when we've loved democracy for as long as we have, right? If Trump had have been elected for a second term back 4 years ago, I don't think we'd be in this situation, but I think you're absolutely right. It's the right time. He's the unique person that can take this forward, right? But when you listen to some of this stuff, like this Yavin guy and some of the other people saying, they'll make jokes. The poor will be biofuel for the energy needed for these new cities, right? So this idea that this very, very small group of predominantly white men are defining the future without wider consultation. So some of those young guys, the 19 to 24-year-olds, one of them's just had to resign because it turns out he's a massive racist, a eugenicist, and all sorts of things, right? And he had this social media history that goes back, and it was hidden, but somebody found it or something, right? I'm not surprised that these aren't charming young men. You can't do something like that, but we don't know what they're doing. We do know what they're doing, but we don't know what they're actually doing right now. And we don't know what the consequences will be on how long it's going to take. But we also don't know who's going to lose, right? We don't, not yet, from the decisions. But from everything I've seen, there's a massive group within society that does not get factored into this future vision that they're planning. So, and these are what do they call them? The ultra, no, what was the term that Musk or Teal said? We need these ultra high status males. I mean, you two aren't ultra high status males by that definition, right? Even though I think you're, but you're not, right? So, but they're defining your future too. And I think that's the other thing people have got to really switch into. It's like, who's defining our future, and do they represent me? Like, like me personally, I know that we need to radically change the world and how we operate in order to deal with the crises we have. But I don't believe that they're the team that are going to deliver that. I don't.
I would agree with you. I think they're the you send out a bunch of pawns to make a mess, and then you send out the bigger pieces on the chessboard. And usually, I mean, I don't know, maybe they can make some decisions, but you know, and speaking of pawns on chessboards, you're wondering why it's all the young people going in to do these sorts of things. They've got opportunity ahead and nothing much to lose.
Yeah.
And the generals stay in the background sometimes as you send out your young troops into the battlefield.
Apart from Musk, right? He's certainly not in the
Yeah,
background.
he's
You
not
know,
in the background.
a lot of people are sort of cowing, you know, in Australia, Tesla sales are down 60%, in France it's 63%, in Germany. But I again, I think people are missing the bigger picture. Like it's you know, they're talking about making the entire government run by AI, and now they can do that now, right? They absolutely can do that, right? But what happens to the people who've been in those roles? And you know, people are like, we're voting for freedom. Well, where's your freedom? Because this is a surveillance state and everything's digital, you know. So yeah, God, there's a lot to this.
Well, I mean, if that playbook played out, then there's revolution.
Mm.
And I don't think in their sort of Augustineville scenario of a little town run by, you know, whoever has applied and is wealthy enough to be in it, who's in the militia?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, is that being hired out to? Is there some sort of? I think it's poorly thought out. If that's the
Well,
plan,
okay.
it's poorly thought out.
So let's talk about what is on the other utopian side of it. So the alternate utopia, right? So we talk about it in the sense of a world where people lose their jobs and all that stuff happens. But so the utopian view on what happens when we all become redundant is then we get to live our lives in you know whatever. There's always a challenge because we talk about the lack of imagination, Andrea. There is also
Yep.
sometimes a lack of imagination on the other side as well about
Mhm.
how life could be, right? I mean, how would you imagine rallying troops? So you know the movie Wall-E. You remember that show? That
Yep.
whole imagining about where they don't have to
Yep.
worry about life, right? It was hard to rally the people to do anything because they didn't need to do anything, right? Life is good. Say, well, you need to stand up and fight for this because your opinion matters and all that kind of stuff. And you go like, and what's the alternative? Well, I get to sit here and enjoy my drinks and food gets served to me all the time. Yeah,
Mm.
tough choice.
And,
So,
and that representation of humanity is how I feel humanity is right now.
right. I mean, and so the question now comes if you think about, I don't think that's what if we talk about the US, I don't think that's the life the US has. The US actually has a lot of people who are wealthy and an even greater number of people who are not. You know, there's a whole bunch of people who are not doing well
Mm.
to the point where they said, let's bet it all on black. You know,
Yeah.
and let's see what happens when we run this next thing. So
Or
that's kind
orange,
of
as the case may
the
be.
situation. Oh, orange, yeah, you go orange, orange, the new black. There you go.
But I tell
How did you
but
do that?
Nicely worked, Lou.
another movie future vision, of course, was Her. Do you remember watching Her with
Yep.
Scarlett Johansson's voice, right? I remember watching that and just thinking that's it. Now, as men in the future, you're going to be wearing very high-waisted pants, according to the movie. But it to me, like,
Okay, I'll
you
put my
know,
waist down just a little bit. Here we go.
Joaquin Phoenix's character, he wrote love letters for people. You know, that was his job. You know, that's something machines couldn't do. But yeah, there's no utopia on the horizon from where I'm sitting. But I think we can work as hard towards it as possible. But I don't believe that utopia is possible. But there's also a dystopian side, right? So that I think from both perspectives, I try and follow the path on either side, and I feel that it's the dystopian path where it's not good for the majority. And if you're a eugenicist like that young guy is, right? So you'll be one of the people that say the planetary crisis is because there's too many people in the world, and therefore we need to get rid of people, and Well, you don't really have to do much for that to happen. You just need to make sure that they don't cross borders and stay where they are, and they live in places where there's no food, or it's too hot to survive, or they're ravaged by like disease, pandemics, whatever. So you could just have that attitude to it all, and you'll get rid of a lot of people very, very quickly. Those sort of ideas. I know people have them.
Yeah, no, and so and this is why it becomes this impossible choice. When you go like there's something about that, but we know while that is going to lead to a better result for a number of people, it also is bad for other people, or it is ignoring the other person, right? So it's the ultimate trolley kind of problem. If you look at humanity as a whole, have we come too far? So even from an environmental perspective, right? Arguably, we have come too far, where we have overstayed our welcome. We shouldn't belong here anymore. We should be rejected from this planet, right? That's really what we've done. But we're insisting on staying for dessert, right? So that's kind of a thing to think about as well. Like is there an ideal world where there are enough resources for everyone? And could we figure out a way to get that? It would be a lot more convenient if we had done all the work 20 years ago and successfully worked on things like right sizing populations and putting aid out in the right direction and doing all the stuff so that everybody is happy, and so you have less of a discrepancy. But now we're here. We're basically locusts, right? If you think about how that works, is that we are all here, we all need food, and we're doing it at such great speed. Everything that's in the way gets eaten, even fellow locusts, right? I mean, that's really where we are. So
it's like the overshoot story, where there's a whole bunch of deer on this island, and they were dropped on this island in World War II. Can't remember. It's up near Greenland. And first of all, they kept going back, and they were flourishing, and then they came back, and they were getting skinny, and there were too many of them, and the grass was getting low. And then the final time they went back, they were eating the roots. So once you're eating the roots, you're on the way to extinction, right? So humanity is eating the roots now. That's the overshoot sort of idea. But there is a way to live on this planet in harmony with the amount of people that we have, but we're not willing to do that, and we're not even willing to talk about it. And we're just consuming more and more and more. But we can do that, but that it's like that fight's too big to win. So this small group of people have decided on this other fight. So they talk about taking Greenland, and everyone's like, "Oh, this is a sovereign nation." Of course they're looking to take Greenland. You want to grab all the land up north you can. Where are they going to build these cities? On these places where the ice is going to melt, and there's going to be some land to build on, right? Of course, that's on the agenda. This is just my take on the stories, right? Yeah, of course, it's for minerals and stuff, but we're going to have the sea creatures are moving north or south. The animals. The trees are moving north. So north is where it's going to be at, right? So of course they're going to look at taking more land up north. Canada, the 51st state, of course, it's up north. They're not trying to take Mexico. Why would you do that? You've got to go north, right?
But
yeah,
I mean, should we move the conversation along to the rest of what we have to talk about today? There's just so much.
Yeah. So obviously the other big thing that's happening is the war on diversity, equality, and inclusion. And I've heard Peter Dutton in Australian elections are going to be soon. He's starting to bring up the whole DEI thing. And, like we talked about it last year, there was a war on woke. And after this election, I think we've recognized that woke lost. But like I said, this idea that high status males can define our future without inclusion, diversity, and equality in the mix, that's kind of not a future I really want to be part of. I don't know about you guys.
Well, I think of it this way, right? I mean, there's in families you have different people you like to visit and some people you don't like to visit. There's some people whose house you get into and you can't move around because you're not free to do things. You can't. First of all, you've got to leave your shoes outside, and you can't touch the flowers, and you've got to have all these. That's that sort of thing. And I think that's what happened with woke, right? We became Auntie Karen. We became the one who knew how things were supposed to be done, and therefore you have to do this way or that way. And then it became this thing about pronouns. It became this thing where you were not safe where you previously were, just being a nice person, right? The things that you were doing just to be nice were wrong. And the things that you were doing to be nice were now not just described as wrong, but they were described as aggressions. And if they were kind about it, microaggressions. That sort of thing really drives people nuts. So this thing about mental health, for instance, right? I think what happened, it became harder to be a human being because of all the rules that society kind of said, okay, these are the new rules right now. So people would, I always felt it was ridiculous to have someone kind of have to kind of pull you aside and say, oh, you can't say that anymore. And I go, why? And then go like, well, because it's you just can't, right? And you go like, whatever. So it's I understood. I can understand why there was such fervor around pushing back, because the brand of it, I think, is what upset people. As in, like, when people talk about diversity, inclusion, and equity, right? I mean, I think there's a kind of brand of that happening actually on the other side as well, as in, like, they are a whole group of people who've been underserved, who've been looked down upon, who've been intellectually, they've been looked as lesser people because of what they believed and what they did and what they find to be valuable. So that there's actually a push back on it, right? So, as much as DEI as a concept is good, but DEI has to be practiced universally for it to be seen as fair. So if you are going to bring on DEI, and you then ask the question, I mean, this I'll put it in a very unsavory way, but where's my redneck who's making my spaceship? I'm not there. You're not represented as well. So that's something to think about as well. It's about, if you have a nice idea, but it's implemented unfairly or in a way that seems unfair, then it's not going to work. If you tell me that DEI is going to be something that's going to be good for everyone, but it really actually is good for people who've gone to university, then that's not right either. It's something that there's so much more to it. I always feel it's just not as simple as saying this concept is flawed, or that's whatever. There are things happening there, and what's happening right now is not what I think is the ideal situation either. But I think it was enabled by the overreaching practices of those who just thought, I know better, listen to me, this is the way it's supposed to be done. And it just got a bit crazy, and you just have to do that often enough, and someone snaps.
Yeah, it's like you go one extreme to the other extreme. We've got to find our way in the middle, and the way quotas worked, right? People are always pushing back on it. I spoke to loads and loads and loads of guys who suffered under DEI. And some of them were the biggest champions of DEI, and yet they still suffered, and that was painful. I think that the journey to failure began with the Me Too movement. While it began as a really, really, really positive thing, where women were finally able to express what had been happening, it very quickly turned into a negative thing, because I remember hosting a women's panel at a bank, and some really, really interesting ladies on this panel. But before we started, I asked the room, and they're all VPs in some of the world's biggest banks. I said, has anyone changed the way they behave with their female colleagues at work since this has come up? And one guy put his hand up. He goes, I don't take any females out for lunch or drinks or dinner. I never get myself into a situation where it's one-on-one. And I'm like, well, that's not good. That's not progress. You know, that's going backwards. So it wasn't right. And, you know, like I keep saying to everyone, you can say whatever you hell you want now, you know, because cancel culture's over too, right? But respect and decency at the core of things. And I just, you know, I just want to make sure that everyone gets the opportunity to live their life to the fullest that they can live and express their talents, regardless of who they are, or what sex they are. But the other thing that we've really got to, you know, the whole transgender thing, the one thing we've really got to bloody put in the mix of this is because there's so many endocrine disruptors in the environment, right? So forever chemicals, microplastics, as well as
Yeah.
pharmaceuticals, right? They're not only changing the sex of like fish. There's these eagles or one of those sort of predator birds in Spain. They're only giving birth to female eggs now. When it gets too hot, so that's a different thing. But when it gets too hot, the turtles, they're either male or they're female because they stand so hot, right? But we've got so many endocrine disruptors, and it's our shampoos, it's our food, it's in our takeaway containers, it's in all of this sort of stuff. So there is more people being born with their hormones being disrupted. So we're going to have more people like that in the world at a time when the world's saying we're not going to tolerate that. And that's something that really, really concerns me. So we're polluting our environment, we're polluting our bodies, we're changing our own sex by doing it. We're going to have more transgender people. And rather than everyone saying, oh, it's just the young kids, they're being influenced on TikTok. No, their body's chemistry is being changed because we're polluting the environment. And now we're saying we're not tolerating that. And so to me, that's a huge concern from a societal perspective. You know, the amount of youth suicide rates will go up. You know, I just saw the other day a young girl who transitioned committed suicide because she just couldn't see any hope for her future, right? So that sort of stuff really worries me. And, you know, are these people who are designing our future world, are they empathetic? Are they compassionate? Are they thinking about these sort of things, you know? Or they,
How old was that young girl?
I just saw a photo, maybe 17, 18.
Okay.
But that's going to be an issue if you don't feel like you're welcome in the world as you are, and your whole life's going to be a battle, right?
So the question I have about this is so I when I get online, because I've told you before, I've just gone into mega groups just to try to figure out who they are. I've gone into black mega groups. I've gone into Spanish mega groups as well. All this on TikTok, by the way, just to have a look see. What's being described isn't exactly what is being interpreted on the other side as well. You know, in terms of it's not that it's not that trans isn't welcome. It's not that the lifestyle or whatever it is isn't welcome. It's the I think what it is it's the imposition of that isn't welcome. As in, you know, sure, everybody can be a little strange. I mean, I'm a little strange in the way I do things as well. And just because I need everyone to speak more factually about things, I can't insist that everyone else do the same as well. I can't say that just because you're speaking in a way which is emotional, that I should shut you down because you're not being factual enough. That's not the way it works. And then the people who are used to speaking, for instance, emotionally, they're all being told that no, you have to change the way you do this. You're gonna have to do this. So now, instead of saying I feel unhappy, you have to go like, well, there are a few things happening in my system right now. Hormonally, I think I'm challenged. It's just after lunch, so I think I've had a drop in sugar, and therefore I'm feeling a sense of disquiet, and therefore I feel unhappy. I mean, it's that kind of thing that causes a pushback, because I really don't get the sense when I'm in those groups that they're anti those things. That they're not anti, as in, like, you know, I see them as really human beings that just want to get along in an easier, more fluid way. They just want to get along. Now, Are there extreme examples of people in that group? Yeah, of course. That is the problem in society in general, like the ultra right, just like the ultra left. You
Mm.
know, the people who will go and consider, terrorism to do the right thing, to achieve the right thing.
Yeah.
That's the ultra left as well. So I think what's really been divisive about this is that we've been painting the other side on either side. We've been painting the other side with the extreme colors of what exists on the other side. And so you're not just someone who is sick of having to do things by all these little nitty gritty rules. Why can't I just go out and have some fun with some friends? Why can't I just have a colleague, a female colleague who I'm really friends with, and give her a hug when I feel like I want to give her a hug? And why that sort of thing. I think that's really what begins to happen. And there's some refinement that needs to go into it as well. The solution can't be like in the example, the weird example I gave a while ago. The solution can't be that therefore everyone else needs to change. You go like, well, maybe is there another way we can do this? Is there another way that we can try and have less of an impact on everybody when Joe enters the room?
Yeah, the male female dynamic, that's always been like, I remember my PR days in London, right? We were absolutely outrageously inappropriate with each other, and everyone was cool with it. The issue comes, and it's always the issue. There's the creep in every office who hassles the females who can't speak up for themselves, right? And they know exactly who those girls are, and they go after them, right? That's where the problem has always been. But the problem is blokes have taken it as, oh my God, we must all be the problem. You know, when we were swimming in our pool in a condo when the boys were small, my husband's there with his hands, he's literally in the pool with his hands in the air like this, so that nobody accuses him of touching the children. And I was like, that sucks that you feel that you have to do that. But that's the world that we've moved into. You know, men are dropping out of education like mad. Of course, why would you want to go into education? And, you know, what does it take to be accused of doing the wrong thing? You know, and our children have suffered, especially the male children, because they haven't got the role models that they used to have. I'm really happy with the education my boys get because there's still lots of male teachers. But yeah, I mean, we got it wrong, you know, and but we don't need to throw it all out. We just need to be honest about what we got wrong. And that's what people don't want to, they don't want to have the honest conversations about anything anymore, you know. But I want my boys to go into a workforce and have fun. And, you know, I mean, we've got that sort of relationship when you guys see me, you don't have to hold back. You don't think, oh, Andrea's going to go and talk to someone if I do the wrong thing. You know, I'm not going to, because we respect each other, right? But we've got to take care of the vulnerable people. And every single female knows who the creeps are. And they're the problem. But all males have been tarnished with the creep brush, and they're not. And I always say there's a 70% magic rule, right? We need to reduce our impact on Earth by 70%. But also 70% of the global population are decent people. We might be a little bit left, a little bit right, but we're decent people who want to get on with things. And on either end, 15% left, 15% right are the extreme ones. They've got the biggest voices. They create the most social disruption. You know, whether it's the anti-vax protests or the anti-COVID lockdown protests or you know, all, you know, and you were talking about, you know, eco-terrorism tends to come from the left, not necessarily from the right, but there are also eco-terrorists on the right, you know. But those 30%, they've been running the world for too long. And the 70% are sitting there going, what do we do? Or disappearing or saying, I can't bear this anymore. And we need to get the 70% together and solidified again and moving in the same direction. But we need to agree that direction versus having this group of people telling us what that direction is. So, you know, that's what I'm fighting for. How do we bring that 70% forward? You know, how do we have an honest conversation? I'm so sick of the bullshit. I'm so sick of the politicized, you know, you're talking about transgender. It's all politicization, especially in the US election. You know, like we talked about it once, you know, there was one transgender surgery in the prison in 1 year. Over like an 8-year period, one, and it was like a big issue. It's like, but there's only one of them. How can that be a big issue? Women's sports, you know, like That's why don't we let women in sport decide what's right? If the women don't want transgender athletes, then that's on them. It's not for somebody else to decide. Like, yeah.
But well, hang on. I mean, is it men deciding for that one?
Well, yeah. Trump's just come out and said no more.
Yeah, but he's said it because
it's a political.
It's been
exactly.
weaponized politically. Yes,
totally. Totally.
Yeah, but I mean, just because he's making the final call, I mean, it doesn't mean that women aren't saying we don't want transgender in our sport.
But it should never have been a political conversation.
I'm playing devil's advocate. I don't have the evidence of it, but I would, yeah. He's the one that can make the decision, and he just happens to be orange. But it doesn't mean that women haven't sort of said we need some changes here. I mean, I think if you'd asked that boxer that was in the ring, I know I don't want to go back there again, but
she wasn't transgender.
I get it, but that was the narrative, and and she would have gone, I don't want it. So
so if that's the decision, so where's the space for transgender athletes to compete?
Transgender Olympics. We got Paralympics.
Right. Let's find a solution. If people want to be the best at sport, and it's not fair for them to for transgender for men who've crossed over to women. And I don't know if I'm using the right phrases or terminology.
I don't know either, but I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me that if you want to create a new sort of gender classification, then you should have your new Olympics.
And there's supposed to be, and there's supposed to be 5 genders. Apparently we're down to 2, but there's supposed to be 5 natural human genders, right? So, so the other, obviously, it's an ancient Indian belief. So there's male and female, and then there's homosexual, lesbian, but also transgender, and they call it. I think that's called 2 spirits. They've got a beautiful way of explaining it. And most of the ancient cultures have got something like that. You see it all over the world, In Thailand, you used to see it. In India, you see it. There's a caste in India, So it's part of our society. Let's make space for it.
All this kind of fits really right into something that I've been working on recently. It's all about the fiction of life, right? I mean, the book I want to write is Tell Better Lies. I just don't think it's going to fly off the shelf, right?
You could say it's the number one bestseller right on the front cover.
Yeah, it could. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. Number one bestseller on the cover.com. So the thing about everything around us, every single thing around us, anything that we describe, any politics, any idea, any color, anything, is that at some point it was fiction. At some point, someone had to make something up about it, so that blue became blue, so that whatever, right? So all these are actually stories anyway, right? All these things that we create are somebody. And I frequently think a lot of these really wise texts have something to do with mushrooms. There's as I hear it, and there's a kind of enlightenment that comes when you realize, none of this matters really. You kind of figure out that there's this and then there's that, and you realize that you can figure out that things don't have to be a certain way, and you can create a story around it. And if the story is attractive enough, and it's a thing that people go like, oh yeah, that kind of fits, I like that, then they take it on and they go, right? I mean, genetically speaking, there is no such thing as a goth, right? Goths cannot exist in the world, but they do. It is a creation out of a desire to look a bit different and to find something. The funniest thing, of course, I used to work with some guy who was, he would dress a certain way all the way. It was kind of the uniform. He was more of a metalhead, right? So he dressed a certain way. He had the flannel shirts and all that. And I always just said, "Are you unique like all your friends?"
Yeah.
But that's kind of the thing, right? It is really just a creation. It really is something. It's all about, we're actually not arguing so much about fundamental things. We're just arguing about taste.
Yeah, well, Well, that's identity, right? Versus, because you just look through the animal kingdom. There is representation of all forms of sexuality there too, right? It's not just when humans aren't unique.
Well, it's just a simple thing. It really is about what you get used to, what you enjoy, what feels comfortable or not. And I really think that one of the things that I've talked about is that if you want your kids to not have sex young, at a young age, tell them exactly what goes on, right?
I think they get over that fairly quickly.
Yeah, well, the thing about certain things, you get used to certain things. So there's certain things on the other side of actions or whatever, where you go like, oh, this is something that I kind of like. This is something I would do again, or be open to trying or whatever. So I think that kind of thing happens with a lot of things in life, right? I mean, well, let's not talk about gender. Let's talk about cigar smoking. Right? It's one of those things. It's like sometimes it doesn't make sense. A whole bunch of people for whom it doesn't make sense. There's a whole bunch of people who go like, "Oh, this is a really great thing. This is really good." I don't smoke. I only do cigars. I mean, whatever, and whatever floats your boat. If you can keep it over there and it doesn't affect me, that's fine as well, right? I just think what we have is an overwhelming desire, and if you forgive me for the metaphor, for people who go like, well, we love cigars, everybody else has got to get good with cigars as well.
Yeah, but I kind of think we're moving in that direction in a different way, right?
It's a swing. Yeah. It is.
But we don't like this, but you have to suck it up and like this instead. Especially the Christian nationalism, message. There's a lot of talk about bringing Christianity and back into every aspect of life in America, and that's just really in the last week that's starting to pick up some momentum. And of course, Christian nationalism is a big part of the force behind what we're seeing, right? So not everyone's a bloody Christian.
Yeah, Tim.
Right. I want to talk about the USA, because this is probably the one that concerns me. I've got friends in high places in a lot of the big global sort of charities doing amazing work, and so the way Elon Musk has been talking about this has been very concerning. We've seen an immediate increase in human trafficking, and we know these people are the most vulnerable people on the planet. What are you going to say, Joe?
I'm just going to take a moment to make it very clear what we're talking about, because of what it sounds like. It always just sounds like we're talking about the USA, right? It's U.S. aid, as in AID, and it's basically a really wide sweeping program by the U.S. To help to make the world a better place in as many ways as they can, and that's what we're talking about. And the reason why we're talking about it is because essentially almost on day one, all spending by USAID was frozen, right? It said that they had to stop every single thing. And so you had crazy stories, people like in line for vaccinations, in line for treatment for dangerous diseases, who literally were second or third in line, and who couldn't get it when the person in front was able to get the care, simply because the program had been shut down that dramatically and that instantaneously.
Yeah, no, it's been really impactful. So Nicholas Kristof, who's he writes for the New York Times, he's looking to go back into politics. And he wrote a book called Half the Sky with his wife. Did you ever come across that? It's a really, really powerful book. Anyway, basically, he's written a piece in the New York Times called "The World's Richest Men Take on the World's Poorest Children." And the first paragraph is, the world's richest man is boasting about destroying the United States Agency for International Development, which saves the lives of the world's poorest children, saying he shoved it into the wood chipper. And what he's saying on Twitter is mis and disinformation, but it's being believed and it's being shared, right? So it's obviously something that could have been improved. It obviously could have had cuts. There was obviously things that weren't quite right, but the extreme sort of impact is going to be felt all over the world. So when they're talking about, we talk about bird flu. A person's died in the United States. I don't know if you just saw recently. There's a new variant in cows, which is sort of bumping up the risk level. In New York, they're now testing everyone. Have you seen the flu? So in Japan, in New York, so just the other day I saw in New York, there's a call out for the vans, frozen, the vans that have got frozen compartments that they put the bodies in. And they haven't seen a surge like that since the big crisis in the pandemic. So it's just starting to surge. In the UK, I just saw this skyrocketing flu. So it could be bird flu. It might not.
Or the cow variant.
No. So in New York, what they're doing is they're testing everyone now. We've got Vicky, I'm just trying to, hi Vicky, who's come to join us. So the other thing, so first of all, the CDC have been muted. They can't talk about this, but USAID also surveils 49 countries. So it's not just the US being impacted, but it's 49 countries. We had Ebola break back in 2004, and that was in Trump's time. And
there's a current outbreak right now, by the way.
Yeah, and there's a new one that's just been reported in Uganda, and 234 contacts identified so far. So USAID would normally suppress it, so that's a real issue. There's another hemorrhagic fever called Marburg virus, which broke out in Tanzania last month. So they're trying to sort that out, but that's something that the US would usually step in, but they're no longer there. Obstetric fistulas, which are a big issue for women in Africa. It's a childbirth injury. So it's a $600 surgery that gives them their life back. Basically, these poor ladies will be walking along with just urine constantly streaming down their legs, right? So that's gone. Elephantitis. So basically men with grotesquely enlarged scrotums, the sort of situation where you have to put it on a wheelbarrow to get it around. So it's obviously incredibly humiliating. So that's something that they've worked on. Malaria is obviously one of the big ones. A lot of people are criticizing Bill Gates for sitting down with Trump. And if you actually listen to what he talked to him about, it was about making sure that all of the programs that he's been working on, including malaria and polio and those sort of things, he's got to work with the leader of the country, right? AIDS, there's incredible work that's been done by America, and it's a program called PEPFAR. That's the acronym. And it's instantly putting people at risk, instantly, of death, but also seeing AIDS emerge as a much bigger threat again. So, people going blind from river disease or all those sort of things. So, and there's also an interesting one. So an evangelical Christian, it's called the International Justice Mission, has USAID support, and they've done incredible work stopping human trafficking in the Philippines and Cambodia, right? So, this, he finishes with, does Trump believe that rescuing children from rape is a radical lunatic cause? So it's that sort of stuff for me that really sort of raises the hackles when, Joe, when you say, it's not all bad what's going on. But it's this stuff. Right?
It reeks of corporate knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah.
When corporate the team sort of sit down and they look at the budget and they go, what the heck has happened? We know we're going to miss our target for the next quarter. Okay, headcount freeze. And they just freeze headcount arbitrarily. And those places that have clarity over exactly what they need aren't getting the right headcount. But those places that are just randomly doing stupid stuff are causing the problem. And so the corporate gets a headcount freeze. And it just sounds like that's the way that this government agency has been stopped, because somebody's gone, look at the numbers. But then there'll be the other narrative, and the other narrative is, why is America the only one paying for all of this? Which of course it isn't. Other people will be paying for stuff too. But that would be their narrative, is like, why are we the ones having to pay for X, Y, and Z? And and there'll be a bunch of people going, yeah, we should be paying for, keeping the money for ourselves, sort of thing. And that narrative is a very easy one to sell.
Yeah.
And
I think they come up at 10th country per person sort of contribution. But they're about 10th in the world for generosity. But
yeah. I mean, but I think that I like what you said. I think they need to look at where the money is going and cut the things that need to be cut. And
don't lie. Don't lie. The condoms in Gaza, like, no, that's not true. It's not true. It's zero. It's the lies. Like, if you've got integrity and you want to, and you believe that you're doing the changes that you're driving are to make a better world, then why are you doing this sort of shit?
Yeah, that seems weird.
It's literally evil what they're doing, because and it's always the poorest. The refugee camps in Thailand. I mean, those poor people. What they've had to endure and what they continue to suffer, and they're just stepping out. Just overnight. It's like no. That's.
I mean, and if you look at the way terrorists are formed, now I've alerted all the bots to what we've said. But if you look at that, it's when aid is withdrawn or help is withdrawn, and somebody dies, and somebody gets angry.
Yeah.
When
you're hungry, you're an easy recruit. When you're desperate, Gaza. Apparently, it's going to become a piece of American real estate, and they're going to build a luxury resort. So, which is obviously Jared Kushner talked about last year, right? So this isn't new. Is it a distraction while all these other ugly things are going on? But it's pretty crazy stuff. What do you guys? What was your impression or takeaway?
I mean,
to a surgeon, all solutions are surgery, right? I mean, that's
yep.
If you're a developer, a real estate developer,
when all you've got is a hammer, everything is a nail.
Yeah.
You're a builder, everything's a resort.
I have to confess that I thought about this idea before.
With Gaza.
In terms of, no, I had some radical ideas for how to solve problems around the world, and a lot of it had to do with giving people money and buying their place over, right? So, in essence, that is something that's similar.
That only works if you're a benevolent dictator, and it doesn't work if your offspring aren't.
Well, for me, the benevolence of it, for instance, is like if you take over everything and everybody who's had it taken over gets a couple of $1 million. It's not a terrible deal. Just that, politically, it's the kind of stuff that people go like, why would you do that? And you go like, it's the cost of peace. Well, why would that make sense? Well, because it costs less than having an aircraft carrier in the area. And
a friend of mine does that in the Philippines. He buys farmers' farms because they're about to go out of business and they can't afford the tractor and the whatever it is, and they're about to go broke. He buys their farm from them, and then he lets them stay on the farm and run their farm. And that's a great idea, and they're very thankful, and they get their livelihood, they get the income, he helps them support it. But ultimately, if he's good, that's great. But it just takes somebody to then take over the whole thing and go, well, I'm going to turn this into a golf resort, or whatever.
Well, a lot of building going on up in the mountains where they used to have farms in the Philippines, which he's going to.
No, but this guy's doing it out of the right reasons. He's trying to help these people.
Yeah, no, it's good. Yeah. But
anyway, having said all that, it's crazy. It is a crazy idea. It sounds terrible, and I think one of the best reactions from all of that. I can't remember who the person was, but someone in the cabinet or someone sort of next to Trump during this announcement has this look, and this person is someone who is in government, has this look of
the woman. What's her name? Chief of Staff.
So she's one of them. And she looks like what the hell?
She looks formidable, that woman. I reckon she'd take absolutely no nonsense at all. She's like the ultimate school mom.
Yeah. Well, he managed to upset the matron with that comment. I mean,
But
because as someone else and everybody else has kind of pointed out, that is literally, without any kind of dressing up, what ethnic cleansing is, right? Get all the people who are not these people out of a place.
the other thing about it, of course, is it's going to become so hot there. Like if you look at the summer, temperatures are increasing. It's crazy. So tariffs, we'll probably need to sort of move quickly. Obviously, the tariff wars have been happening. China's been a really interesting one because what they've done is they've come back with tariffs that are sustainability focused. So they're focusing on 15% tariffs on coal and liquefied natural gas products, as well as 10% tariffs on crude oil, agricultural machinery, and large engine cars imported from the US. I believe they've also reducing their things like agricultural purchases like soybeans because they can get them from other places like Russia and Brazil. They're also studying a case against Google. But there was a really interesting scenario that I heard discussed. So when the Mexico-Canada tariffs were being discussed, right? So what happens to a place like Mexico, right? So first of all, they have to close their factories, like the automobile factories and stuff. So they're going to close factories. Many people are going to lose their jobs, just as potentially hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Mexicans are going to be forced to come home. So then you're going to have a lot of people competing for a very small amount of jobs, which is going to create violence in the communities, and mobs will form, which means the Mexicans tourism industry is going to crumble because who's going to want to go there on holiday, right? So when you start sort of going through if this happens and this happens and this happens and this happens, and it was looking very, very painful. I'm impressed with. I think the Canadians handled themselves very well. I think Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico handled herself very well. But yeah, this tariff trade war thing. The next topic that we've got here is BRICS. I think going after China is. Are we seeing the end of the great empire, as many people are saying? Because BRICS is on the rise. 50% of the world's population is now part of BRICS, and that's 40% of the global GDP. We've just seen Indonesia join it, and nations have just said that they're going to join. Turkey, and I think it was Slovenia. So,
Happy birthday, Clinton Taylor's father-in-law. Happy 80th.
Yeah, absolutely, big one.
Enjoy your dinner.
Yeah, so BRICS. I mean, I think it's something that we're not. We pay attention to it because we're in this part of the world. But thoughts?
I mean, look, it's just a grouping, right? It's a grouping of people who basically weren't invited to the party, and they set up their own party. I mean, that's
Yep.
really ultimately what happened. And so, I mean, I know we're supposed to have moved on from U.S. aid, but what that is right now is by doing all this stuff, it's really letting China come in and be the really nicer host for a really nicer party. Right, because what U.S. aid was doing and has now suddenly stopped doing is doing all the important stuff. It's philanthropy by a country, and therefore buying you friends, right? Buying you influence in places where you normally wouldn't have as much influence because you're the good guy, right? You're he's America, but he's all right because he does all this other stuff as well. Now he doesn't do all the other stuff, right? Now he's just complaining that he was paying for everything and he's taken away everything, and he's saying, I don't want to pay for all of it. And then you go like, well, hang on, I didn't have the stake, whatever. It's a bizarre conversation that happens. So the soft power that the U.S. used to have through U.S. aid and through other kinds of ventures has been removed. And economically, what happened is this, right? And if the U.S. plays hardball and makes it hard to do business with the U.S., well, business still continues, and they'll look for whoever else it goes well with, right? So if you look at BRICS, and as BRICS develops and gets more significant, every day it actually threatens the U.S.'s ability to influence the rest of business in the world, because less and less the US dollar becomes less and less the absolutely necessary currency, because you could conceivably change the currency with which the world actually trades in. I mean, it's
Well, it's already
hard
happening.
to do. Yeah, it's hard to
It's
do
already
though. I mean,
happening.
it's like, as much as there is an impetus to do that, there's a reason why they still have that much strength, because of power. But this last bit, US aid, and the tariffs, all that kind of stuff, basically it's the opening of the hand that lets the grip go, on a
Yeah.
lot of these things, because now there's no reason. Now this is the unfriendly, the unfriendly couple where they've been staying for the kids, and suddenly the kids have said, "Oh, it's okay, we're going out, we're leaving the house." So that's really that thing. There's nothing else left for them to really hang on to. I know this
Mm.
sounds like a real big pronouncement, but really there's so much less to hang on to. There's no relationship to hang on to. So it is a lot easier for people to go and say, "Oh, there's a party going on over there." I mean, if you look at where the world's economic power is going to be, look, China undeniably, but the other area, of course, Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
I mean,
ASEAN.
ASEAN, yeah, exactly. So
And there's
it's growing.
And there's an interesting Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and South Korea. They're forming a really interesting alliance. I mean, there's some big shifts happening. And I just in case people didn't know, so BRICS, if you don't know about it, it's worth looking into. But it stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And they had some big announcements last year where Egypt and Ethiopia were invited. And people are like, why would you invite them? And one of the things that what I find really interesting about BRICS is that they're inviting in countries that have got a long cultural heritage. So they might not necessarily be in a good position right now, but they've got a rich history, because countries like China have got such a beautiful, rich history, right?
And they start with a vowel.
Yeah, I was going to say, you want
Yeah.
to add countries that can add cutesiness to your group, like the BRICS. Sounds fun.
Did I say? Yeah, I said. But yeah, so I find the BRICS thing is a really interesting. It's really, really changing the balance and the economic impacts, and talking about China's offloading its debt, its US dollar debt, which is huge. It can have a huge impact on the US economy. So, we're going into some hard times, right? But let's move on to artificial intelligence. Obviously, we were talking earlier, Elon Musk is talking about replacing government employees all with artificial intelligence. It was always, artificial intelligence was coming. Now it's just going to come more rapidly. DeepSeek obviously got a lot of attention. I think a lot of people have missed the story. You're seeing a lot of people going on to DeepSeek and asking, show me a picture of a man with a shopping bag standing in front of a tank. And then DeepSeek will respond and go, I don't have any information on that. But the story for me of it was never about that, about Chinese censorship. It was about how expensive AI is, which is obviously why the share market had a big impact. But I don't know if the media or the Western influencers sort of pushed it back towards this censorship side, and now, government officials in Australia, you can't have it on your phone because, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. But I think they're missing the point. It's how easy it was to develop and cheap it was to develop and deploy it. But Joe, you're much more sort of paying attention to things like that than I am.
Well, first of all, I mean, let's just put in the context why it made such a big difference, right? It's basically about the shift in who is the AI superpower, right? It's the idea that if you think back to the early days of rocket travel, rocket ships and stuff like that, going to the moon, that whole thing was about supremacy. Who is the superpower? Who has the ability to do that? And America was far and away so far ahead. My chat GPT is not working very well. It's one of those things where the shift of power is what really happened there. So when it was just assumed that because of what was required, China couldn't do it, blah blah blah, Then it was done. Then it was done for cheaper, and then they had to try and find all kinds of ways that they have cheated, and then they perhaps cheated. The fact is simply this, right? AI by DeepSeek is cheaper. It's more available. I've tried using it. I like it. I like it a lot because it actually kind of for me, I like it because it explains itself. If you use the research version of it, it tells you what is going on. It tells you how it's thinking. It's like really looking inside the mind of a pretty clever guy as they're describing their thoughts. Guy, girl, same thing for me. Now, the reason why it wiped out as much value is because the whole idea of what the value was before is because this is expensive. It's expensive to create all this. This technology is expensive, so the investment is important, and so this is what we need to keep going, right? So that basic assumption was basically taken away. It's like it was made null. It's like, it does not take hundreds of millions. It takes tens of millions to create this particular technology, right? And of course, the greatest irony that everyone who's been keeping an eye on AI loves is that how people are complaining that DeepSeek was quite possibly trained on ChatGPT.
Mm.
Fair enough, because that's the
Well,
way
yeah,
it works.
and how was ChatGPT sort of, fed originally, right? So all of our data
Yeah.
has been used by, Grok, it's all using Twitter data, right?
First mover innovator is always the most expensive as they educate the market anyway. It's the second one. That's what Apple's strategy is, just wait and see and then come in with a better version. Usually. Not always, but usually.
Oh yeah,
then
did you
you can
see
grow.
did you see Google's now announced that it won't it had a statement that it wouldn't be involved with artificial intelligence for defense and military and security. Did you see that? And now they've said that that's no longer the case. So not only have they finished their DEI initiatives, they're going to allow AI to be used in that capacity. So that's what's their tagline? Do no evil.
It was. That was taken away a long time ago.
Used to be,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's finish on my favorite topic, which I see everything that's happening in the world through the lens of the planetary crisis. So, did you guys know that January was 1.75 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels? Did you know that? So the
Had
first
no
month
idea.
of this
It
year.
was quite cold
Right.
in Singapore.
Yeah, it's been lovely, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, don't worry, the heat's coming. Hot season's just around the corner. Yeah. So
Oh, man.
basically, because it's been it's sort of a fading La Nina. It's supposed to. So I was hoping that 2025 would be a cooler year after the last couple of years where it's been so intense. So 2023 was the hottest. 2024 was hotter, and now we've kicked off 2025 with 1.75 degrees above. So we obviously saw the catastrophic fires in LA, which were politicized. Did you see about Trump getting all that water released that the farmers are just like, oh my God, this is the water that we need, in 6 months' time when there won't be any. Yeah.
We should spend a moment to talk about what actually happened, right? So this is about Trump and all the bluster about water and water kept up and water supplies being held back. And so what he did was he did an executive order to release. I'm not sure if it actually has happened, but I know the order was given.
No, it did.
Anyway, so
but they were going to do it.
Yeah.
But they were going to do it, and the guys who actually do that job said to the engineers, like, no, you can't do it because we have to warn everyone downstream, especially the people that live on the river, because they might get washed away and drown. We usually give them like a week or 2 weeks notice before we do a release. So they delayed it by a few days, but they did release it, and it's gone nowhere near where the fires were.
So that's the big news about what all this is about, right? That big release was to release water out there, and it went in the completely wrong direction. And that's the brilliance of it. It's not like someone did something radical and did it in the right direction. That would be something radically
And they
interesting.
did it after the fires were out anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but the idea of it was, okay. So the big idea is that, get all that water out there, let the ground soak it up and what have you, and all the different things that went along with that. Except it wasn't solving the problem, and it was actually just wastage. It was the waste of the resource, which is really what is upsetting about that.
Yeah. Oh, it's crazy, right? Just in the last week, there's terrible floods in Australia, in Queensland, and they're expecting more rain to come back through this weekend. So it's sort of up north in the sort of Townsville area. I've driven from Rocky back into Brisbane when a flood was rising, and it's actually quite a terrifying experience. But it's been really crazy. There's record snowfall in Japan. Have you seen the cars completely covered in snow? And the Philippines is now preparing for an extreme rainfall event. So I'm really sort of thinking for people there, because in countries like the Philippines, you see a lot of landslides, a lot of people die that way. And all of this is happening when James Hansen and his team, who's always on the sort of the extreme edge when it comes to climate predictions, but as far as I've seen, he's never been wrong, has basically said 2 degrees Celsius warming is dead. So we've just passed 1.5. He said we're 2 degrees Celsius is dead. I actually think that's the case. I think we've got no chance, right? And 2 degrees is when we've lost all the world's coral reefs. So just the impact and the fallout of that. So, and in the meanwhile, in the US, they're out of the Paris Agreement, which we of course expected. They're shutting down NOAA, which is their sort of their weather agency, scientific agency, and the academics and the scientists are being silenced. So from a where the path that we're on now perspective, it's not looking good. And I think this South African cabal, I think what they're doing is looking at building these future cities so they can, move there. But they better get moving, because they're actually running out of time. And I have to say, Palestine's not a good place for one of those cities, because it's going to be too hot. But Greenland might make some more sense. But yeah, it's accelerating, and the scientists don't know why. That's the biggest problem. So Hansen is putting it down to sulfur, so aerosols, and we've talked about that before. But as China's cleaning up its act from an environment perspective, less aerosols, right? More warming. If India cleans up its act, more warming. So we're on this, but there's some significant volcanic activity and earthquake activity. You've seen Santorini. Have you seen the earthquakes happening in Santorini? Thousands of them, and it's just in the islands around. It's fascinating. Every day, it's like there's just constant earthquakes. They're not sure what's going to happen there. They don't think it's a volcanic. It's earthquake, but yeah, that's significant. No, you should go and check it out.
I'm shocked because I'm going there in June, if it's still there. Well, I think I'm going there in June.
Yeah, you might need to relook at that one. It's been going on for a good week or so.
Okay.
So anyway, all right. So just to wrap up, that I know a lot of people are really struggling with this time. They're kind of stepping away, don't want to face it. I'm a believer that you've got to face it, because if you don't face it, you can't be prepared for it. So any thoughts, guys, on your advice to everyone what to do?
Comedy is always good. Go look for it. Find the people who will speak the truth and find the funny angle on things, because I think you'll do two things there. Usually you find a way to learn some stuff, because in that emotional release, there's always stuff you'll pick up on. And I guess maybe along with that, just make sure your comedy is fact checked. I know it's a ridiculous thing to say, but try and use comedy that's based on facts.
Yeah, I encourage dark humor. Steve's good for that.
The strategy of not looking and not paying attention, it seems selfish, but I also think it kind of works for a group of people, because not everyone's made for the fight, and that's really the way the world works, right? You got to have people who are good at doing something, and maybe this is not their time, right? I mean, if you're being invaded by marauders, the person who is the expert at knitting can take a seat. I mean, I just feel, despite the fact they have needles, It
Yeah.
might be, yeah, it might be just a thing to go like, okay, you go and organize. You've done a pastiche before. Please organize something in the background. Make us feel good about ourselves. Obviously, it's not a thing I've thought about for a long time, but it just came out that way. Sorry, everybody. But so some people are not there to fight, and I think what is an issue in the world currently is this: everybody wants you to be like me. Everybody wants other people to be as angry as they are about the same things, care about the same things. I mean, let's take
Mm.
all the serious stuff out of the way. When have you met someone who's just discovered how good coffee can be, who's not insufferable, right? So that's kind of I think where we are. We have to let some people who are not built for standing up at this time to take a seat. But those who have the ability, those of you who know, who go like, you know what, you find yourself in a place where I could do something about this, but you're deciding not to. Maybe it's time for you to step forward and go, okay, I'm gonna do something about this. And you don't always have to do it all 100% or even a high number like that. Like taking a stand, for instance, on the environment bit by bit. We've done it very slowly in our house. I know. Like for you, Andrea, you're probably more hardcore about the whole thing. You take the family out, you clean up the beaches. What we've done is we've stopped using, we stopped introducing, like plastic containers into the house. Right? I mean, we
Right.
don't actively get them, but when we do get one of those, we also reuse them because we got to get our microplastics. But the idea is do something, but it doesn't have to be 100% kind of
Yeah.
transformation. Don't think of it like being pregnant and not pregnant. You can be a little environmental.
But you can't be a little bit pregnant, or you can be, or a little bit not pregnant. I don't know. No, I think that's good. But the one thing I would say, like, so let's look at the 70% that I was talking about earlier, right? So we need this group to mobilize and rise, right? Because the 30%, they're mobilized, they're fighting, right? If you can't do it, and I totally get that. Like, I talk to people about this who are really struggling from a mental health perspective. They're just exhausted, and that's the goal of what's been going on, by the way, to exhaust us. But nurture and nourish the people who are fighting. Just do that, and there's so many ways you can do that. And if you don't know how to help somebody, ask them. If someone's out there being a voice or acting in a way that represents something that you care about, but you haven't got the energy to do it, ask them how you can help. Because that's the one thing, you just don't feel supported when you're doing it. You just don't. And that makes it hard because you're just tired all the time. You're just like, come on, guys, yeah. Those beach cleanups. I was like, come on, guys. I was trying to make it look fun because I wanted people to want to do it. And then I'd bring Steve along and he'd be like, oh, this is awful. It's so hot. And I'm like, can you just smile and pretend? Just, let's make it fun for the boys. Yeah. I would say just really focus on the things that matter to you. The flooding the zone with shit, right? This is happening, and every single day there's a new piece, and you kind of like when you're watching it. You got to really step back from this, and the most sensationalist news is not the most important news. There's something happening behind the scenes. So I'd pay attention to those people that I mentioned earlier. They've got a mission. They've got the perfect opportunity to execute on that mission. Is that mission in your interest? And if it's not, what are you going to do about it? Especially if you're a parent, right? What are you going to do about it? Because this isn't just America. This will ripple out and consume the world, right? I feel good here in ASEAN. I think there's a strength in this community, political strength as well as regional community. But it will ripple out and consume the world. So we've got to pay attention. And you're raising girls, both of you, right? What does it mean for them? What does it mean for their future? What are their opportunities like, right? You've got a child with a disability. What does it mean for them? What are their opportunities like? So, I think paying attention and getting involved in the things that you really care about and not being overwhelmed, because you can't take it all on board. You just can't. It's too much.
Yeah,
Tim?
actually, my point would have been, it piggybacks nicely on that, insofar as it's, if you're feeling overwhelmed or you're feeling anxious about it, withdrawing is, while it's understandable, the better option is to talk to someone,
Mm,
and whether that's a counselor, or whether that's a friend that's involved, or whether that's your community, is to um, get some pastoral care, I guess, from those people in your community that can help, or that are shepherds for that community. Because I just think that it's that'll do two things. And that'll reinvigorate with what community can do,
yeah.
and the support networks that Andrea was talking about, supporting the people who are doing something. Um, if you're speaking to them as well about it and just saying how you're feeling, they may have already gone through that stage of feeling and can sort of help you through it. But
Yeah.
also, it can help them know that you're actually also concerned, and that what they're doing matters. So it sort of ends up being a two-way thing. But even if it's just speaking to a counselor who has no idea what the heck is going on, but is trained to listen and help you process, that might be good too. It doesn't mean that everyone has to go out and get therapy immediately, but it just means talk it out. Don't shut it up and hide away from the reality of what is happening, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Nice. I just looked and I've got two golden spikes coming out of the top of my head. So yeah, can you see that? I have to make sure those screws are in a different spot next time. No, yeah,
Yeah.
good one. And like, if anyone wants to, for me, the journey to acceptance of sort of looking at the path that we're on as a global society and what we've done to nature, and getting beyond the horror of what we faced and just moving into a place of acceptance. So it doesn't matter what happens, like what's happening in the US. I just sort of the dark humor comes in, right? I just sort of sit there and go, of course that's what we're doing. Like, let's not do what we have to do. Let's do that instead, right? Oh, good, okay. But the path to acceptance, it's been a really interesting journey. But because it's whatever happens, I'm ready for it. But I'm still going to do everything I can to make sure that the worst doesn't happen. That's the place that I got to. It took a long time. I'm happy to talk to people about that if they want to talk about it. Because if you're just sitting in fear all the time, it's just
Debilitating.
no one makes a good decision from a place of fear.
Yeah.
So I don't have any fear in me. I was just like, oh yeah, okay, here we go, next one. Oh,
I've made
look,
a lot
we
of
made
bad
another
decisions
stupid
to a place
decision.
with no fear.
Yeah, well, yeah. But you've learned a lot of lessons.
Well, what I
I'm
wanted
afraid
to
so.
do is actually just advise anyone to look at the world more
Discerningly.
broadly, as in, like, just have a look at it. Have a look at the world from a larger perspective, because we're really bad at looking at the world through the real statistics, right? We can get our attentions drawn to something because something happens right in front of us, and we get really upset by that, but we don't look at the big picture and say things are bad, things are good, right?
Yeah.
So from a lot of metrics, right, the world is good. The world is good, but we have a really bad BO problem, right? I mean, that's kind of what's going on in the world. And I was going to invite people to do this, right? Really think about going through your life as dealing with a bag of M&Ms, right? If you're convinced that the world is full of yellow M&Ms, you will see yellow M&Ms showing up all the time, and you might not even realize that the other M&Ms are there. This is an unpaid sponsorship. I'm just going to keep going, right? But the green ones, as you know, are the sexy ones, right? So if you're open to
It's the
looking
red
out,
ones.
no, the green ones are supposed to be the aphrodisiac.
I
That's why
already
she's got high
finished the
heels.
packet. You guys keep
Oh.
talking.
Yeah. that ability to understand that not the whole thing is not that no small part of it is the whole thing, can help
Yeah.
you, first of all, find that there is light in the world, even if you I mean, you just don't like chocolate because it's everywhere. But there's light. There is light. Um, and also for yourself to go, look, I don't have to do. I don't have to flip the switch and just become something else. This doesn't have to be the answer. Not the answer is not this or that. It's about putting on a little bit on what you've already gotten, right? I mean, it can work. It does work. It's even if you don't believe it does work, try it. Like I'm strangely, my mind's doing this right now to me. It says, have you ever had apple with cheddar? The first time I ever heard about the idea, I was like, I was revolted by the whole thing. This is an apple. Why would I mix it with cheese? And then I had it, and I went like, this kind of works, and I'm doing both at the same time, right? So there's something to this. There is, like for instance, people who we talk about fashion, right? Talk about how fast fashion is and how it's bad for the environment, and people who want to be fashionable go like, oh yeah, I can't keep on doing that, and so they have to make a choice and hop across and just don't consume or whatever. There is a middle ground. There's lowering your consumption. There is increasing the purchase you make from a secondhand shop as part of your way of dressing yourself, combining with a few new items. There are all kinds of things. You can decide a better policy. For instance, when you buy clothes, you can decide that instead of sending it back, what you can do is you can go into the secondhand market or carousel and maybe sell it on to somebody else. At least then you're helping it be better than just go like, okay, I don't want this, send it back so that it can be thrown away by somebody else.
Although most of the charity shops don't want the fast fashion stuff. They're just overwhelmed by it, which is why so much of it ends up on the beaches of Africa, and the deserts of Chile. So you just got to stop. We just got to stop buying it. Like, and there's I was reading an article the other day, the increase in breast cancer in women, obviously, because of the chemicals that are in shampoos and body products and stuff. But it's also the chemicals and the plastics in the clothes, which the fast fashion are known for. So especially like sports gear, right? These women are wearing bras and singlets and stuff that's touching their body, and their skin is absorbing the chemicals and the microplastics straight into their body. So just from their own health perspective. But I do think we need to address the addiction that exists for so many people who can't help themselves but buy this stuff, so they're getting themselves into incredible debt. But it's an addiction that needs a proper solution.
I mean, I see that as just having a lack of purpose. And it's almost escapism through feeling like I'm accomplishing something by going out and buying something, and I've gone out, I've hunted, I've got something valuable to and I've come back, and that feeling wears off very quickly, and so they have to go out and do it again, which, like you said, is an addiction. But it's because there is an unmet need. And going back to the counseling side, it really is, what is the unmet need that's driving that particular behavior? And usually you can't see it, and somebody else is not in the game, so they can see how you're playing the game. And getting that clarity of distance is really, really important.
But you got to be ready for that message, right?
Pardon?
You got to be ready to hear that message. Like a lot of people.
Well, yeah, totally. And usually that readiness comes when there's another financial priority comes into your life and you're struggling to meet the bills.
Yeah.
So
just get out and clean up beaches. That'll keep you busy.
Well, I was just talking to somebody about this today, right? It's like we're all addicts. We basically are all addicts. We're all addicts of something, and it just happens to be that you have a good habit or a bad habit, right? That's the lucky kind of thing that I think we have. I'm convinced that I'm someone with undiagnosed ADHD, so I have many bad habits and good habits all at the same time. And it keeps me happy enough. It makes me feel like I'm okay. So if we understand that and kind of can feel for other people as well, and go like, actually, what fuels bad behavior is the same thing that fuels good behavior. It is something that you understand about the story, so that as you're doing the hard thing or the good thing, it actually makes you feel better. You're actually getting drugs released into your body to reward you for those difficult things you're doing. That's wonderful, right? But most people don't have that insight. They don't know it, and so they can't have that story running in their head, so that they can't feel great about doing the workout. I still can't. It's that kind of thing. So actually the work on dopamine, if you can, and you're wondering where to go and find stuff, is do as much research as you can right now about how dopamine works and how our brain responds to it, and how we can modify our behaviors so that we can actually we can trick our future selves a little bit, so that we can start doing things that are good for us, so that we start feeling the benefits of a positive reinforcement with dopamine. Dopamine is not bad. It actually helps keep us alive. But we can't just let it indiscriminately guide the way we do things, right?
We've
So
never had so much dopamine in our lives, right? So it used to
you mean
be
from this thing?
no, well, no, it's not just that thing, right? It's all of it's everything. It's
Yeah.
and it's like, and so it was funny you brought up dopamine, understanding how our brains work, understanding how the ancient brain was formed. So dopamine was the time that the tribe found cherries, and everyone had the pleasure of cherries, but you might not find them for 12 months. And so today, it's like ping, 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 ping is dopamine constantly going off, and that's not what we're built for. But we become addicted to dopamine, and it's, you say everyone's got an addiction. We do all have addictions, and people only like to focus on some of them, but there's digital, there's physical, there's just so many addictions. But we're going back to the news and the overwhelm. Like, if you're constantly sitting in that ding, ding, ding space of like, oh my God, can you believe what Trump has done? Oh my God, can you believe what Elon Musk has done? All day, every day, if you're but if you're feeling really strong emotions every time,
That's cortisol now.
Yeah, exactly. That's moving it over, right? But they go together. But that's when you've got to sit back and go, okay, wait a minute, step back from it. If you're constantly activated emotionally in a negative way, I think that's a real sign. Just step back and take the emotions out of it. Like, I can't pay attention to this stuff if I'm emotional all the time. Because could you imagine how miserable I'd be? You've got to take the emotions out of it. Sometimes you can't, and that's just step back.
But
Yeah, but no, when I say step back, I don't say step away. I say step back.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
That's so I mean, people tend I mean, you look at a 20-year-old who's in a relationship, is having difficulties at work, and something else is going on in their life, and they tend to try and take control by breaking up or quitting the job. It is, and that's how some people are behaving to world news sometimes. It's to just quit it. And rather than just go, okay, how am I playing this? How am I playing this out? Maybe that's a terrible one. I should have used an M&M's example, but
I still don't get the M&M's example.
Yeah, I'm not sure I got it either. But I wanted to eat some now to get some dopamine. I can't help but think that there was a couple of commandments in those 10 commandments, which was, the first one was you shan't have any other gods before me. So. And the second one was you don't create any idols. And these addictions are because we are giving our attention to these things that we are addicted to, and that becomes our purpose for being. Like, I know a woman who every paycheck, it's not my wife, every paycheck goes out and buys a new handbag, and
oh wow,
and a new branded handbag, and that's her thing. And I'm just like, just save up and buy property or something. I mean, I don't know, something in Greenland.
Yeah.
Because it, but that's but that's my passion, that's my hobby, that's my thing. It's like, I don't know, I think you could get another one. It's an idol in a sense. It's that thing that is is being put before you that is capturing all your attention. And I'm not just talking about that, but it's capturing all your attention and it's becoming the thing that is controlling your desires, your behavior, your emotion, which is why the big guy in the sky said, worship me, not because he needs it, but because we need to not be worshiping these other stupid things. So
Yeah.
that's about as theological as I'm going to get today. Probably.
No, that's okay. All right, what are you watching?
I am the truth, the chocolate, and the life.
What the truth, the chocolate, and the life.
Yeah. All right. What are you consuming at the moment that's giving you a moment of distraction? I figure I'll start for once. Started watching Yellowstone. So I've watched season 1. Have you guys seen it?
No.
I tried starting it. I don't know why it didn't quite catch me. But I tried. I'll try again. I do want to go back to it.
It's not the distraction because it's some pretty nasty people. It's pretty ruthless, but it's a different take on cowboys than I've ever seen before. But what I like about it is like everyone's harmed in some way, and as it goes along, you start to understand more about why they're an arsehole because of this, right?
Sounds like global politics.
Yeah, exactly, right. So yeah, it's kind of one of those. But I think I'm enjoying it. Just watch season 1, and there's some fascinating characters in it. But there's a cruelty to the life, which I suppose has to be that way. I don't know, but I know Tim, you're racing towards finishing your degree.
Yep. At the moment, I'm reading this, which is about worldview. And so at the moment, I'm looking at different worldviews and how worldview works, the structure of worldview, the various lenses, confirmation bias, which we talked about today, and how all the different lenses are there. This is obviously this one is Introduction to Christian Worldview, pursuing God's perspective in a pluralistic world. So it's trying to understand worldview, and they're unabashedly saying we're talking about this one, but we're looking at it in a world where there's lots of other worldviews. So we're not being myopic about the worldview, and we're understanding about how people are thinking about things. And what was really interesting about worldview is if you've really thought about 4 major questions of the worldview, and if you've really thought about where our beliefs and thinking and everything else comes from, and what the answers to these 4 major questions, if they've really thought about it and come to a conclusion, that person's harder to shift than somebody who isn't really paying attention. And the person who's not really paying attention is the easier one, because you dangle a handbag in front of them and they'll follow you, for example, that other person, just linking up all these things together. But I just found it, I found it really interesting from that perspective as well. And I'm forced to read it anyway, because I have to write a paper on it. But it's also
sounds interesting.
Yeah,
I can say that definitely was not part of my Catholic education, that perspective.
No, it is. This is the only worldview, and you're going to hell if you don't have it. I mean, no. So this is it's the whole point of we're in this sort of pluralistic society. So it's really interesting. I just found it fascinating. You want to know what the 4 questions are?
Yep.
The four major questions. The first one is, what is our nature? Like, what do we like? What are we reacting to? How are we being? What is our world? I think you'll like this, Andrea, actually. What is our nature? What is our world? What's the nature and character of the physical world? Order, chaotic, closed system, open system. How is it actually structured and working? What is our problem? And what's wrong with us as human beings? How can it be solved? What's wrong with the world? How can it be solved? And then what's the end, or the Greek word telos, which is purpose, end, goal, destination. And then it's making sense of life in terms of, who am I? What is the world and this place that I'm in? What is the problem of the world in which I'm participating, rather than putting our head in the sand saying there isn't one, or operating obviously of a naive, sheltered narrative that our parents trying to keep us away from a lot of this sort of stuff, and that we operate with that worldview or an us and them worldview rather than it's just us. And then what's the end? What is our trajectory, and how are we going to behave then? Because we've investigated a little bit about who am I in this world, and how am I going to play the game? And I think it's quite nice, because really your whole thing about No Show and about climate courage and about everything else is answering these 4 questions and saying, what do we got to do if this is where we are, and this is what the problem is, and this is the direction that we're heading. What you really then go back to is that very first question of who am I playing in that world? And what you're trying to encourage people to do is to identify that they are a person who has a voice to make a change, to try and change the direction by playing in the world. It's quite cool, but it's
and how do we behave, right? I like that. How do we behave when we get on that? So
otherwise, some people could come in to listen to today's show and just go, "This is a bunch of conspiracy theorists, having a bit of a whinge and saying the world's going to end." I mean, it could have sounded like that.
I wouldn't say this is a bit of a whinge. I would say it's quite a whinge.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've run over M&Ms too, so that's the other whinge. But yeah, it was quite a whinge. But it is, there's an element of being curious about how we're playing the game, and is the way that I'm playing the game working for me, for others, and for the greater community. So
have you seen Conclave? Anyone seen Conclave yet?
No.
No.
You talked about that last time. Well, that was months ago, of course.
No. It's only just it's a movie. It's just
maybe we talked about it at your dinner party, at Alex's party. I don't know, but I remember you talking about it.
I only watched it like a few days ago. It's about the election of a pope.
This whole thing prophetic.
Yeah.
Anyway, tell us about it.
Anyway,
I'm not helping.
That's worth watching. That's worth watching.
Okay.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I won't tell you about it because you just have to watch it. Joe.
All right. So what I've been distracted with myself, I've been getting quite heavy into this thing about trying to write a book. Right. I've got about story. Right. I told you about this before. Right. Telling better lies, and it's basically this whole thing about how everything it's almost like everything I hear is almost solvable with the word story. How do we do this? How can we fix it? I'm to the point where I want to challenge someone who works on the Enneagram system, and I say, I think I can change the personality of somebody, right? But that's one thing I'm trying to work with. I'm challenged with the actual writing because I'm so organized. So I'm looking at different tools. I'm experimenting with different things. So but I do think I'm in danger of actually having a book by the end of this year. So let's see how
congratulations,
that happens, right?
Okay.
But the usual media kind of the media recommendation that I'm going to put out. There's a show that it's quite new. And it's been created by I don't know how many of you ever saw the series This Is Us.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, Empty Room. No, it's all right.
Yeah.
It was a very successful series quite a few years ago, but it was basically one of those shows where they described it this way: you would tune in to cry. It would be one of those things where it'd be some kind of cathartic or therapy kind of. It would feel that way. It was nice storytelling and all that kind of stuff.
The star in every show is a bit different, right?
A bit of that, yeah, a little bit of anyway. So the same writer creator has produced a new show, and it's one of those shows where there's so much going on in terms of as you find out one thing and then you find out the next thing. It is just an absolute delight. So it's an absolute delight in terms of the storytelling, the world that it is, without you realizing what it is, and it's on
unraveling
Disney.
of the mystery.
Yeah. It's on Disney Channel, and it's called Paradise. Try not to run ahead and read more than what it's about in terms of the general gist of things, because it is just fascinating. I think it was one of those things which I thought that was only going to be a bit more like my kind of show, and then as it goes along, it becomes more of a show that even Andrea, I think, might find an interesting take on things. But I really don't want to say much more than that. It's one of those shows that's so delicious that I say, you just trust me on this. Watch Paradise. They've only
I'm
released
Conclave.
Paradise. I'm looking at this is. I'm looking at them. This Is Us sort of marketing. It doesn't look like a show I've seen, but it would have been a show that I would have thought, there's no way in hell I could get Steve to watch it. But no,
it's not. It's not. It's a worse, more emotionally manipulative version of Little House on the Prairie. You would not have liked it.
Okay.
Where's Conclave? Where's Conclave showing?
Movie.
Netflix?
It's a movie. So I don't know. I can't remember. But yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
It could be still at the cinemas. I don't know.
Oh, really?
I'll ask Steve.
Yeah,
You'll know.
that's the slightly controversial. I say slightly with inverted commas. One about the Pope, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's really interesting. Very interesting. Anyway, we should wrap up. More than 2 hours. Thank you for joining us. We've had people popping in and out. You can see. But yeah, been just great to talk about this because I've obviously been spending a lot of time. And Joe, I don't know if you were surprised that I didn't come into this with a negative opinion of everything that's going on. I don't know if that surprised you, because to me, that's not how to approach anything. There might be some positives out of this. The side that always makes me go, "What the hell's going on?" is the evil stuff. It's the the USAID stuff. It's it's that sort of thing. But we don't know, and we've got to keep our eyes open. But we've got to protect what's important. And we've also, Tim was talking about community. The most important thing we've got to do right now is come together with our communities. It's a very local focus that we need to be developing right now to sort of bring people back together again. So, but yeah, no, it was really good to talk about it. It's big, it's complicated. We're here every 2 weeks if you want to make sense. And this is Tim's last season with us. So, yeah, see you guys in a couple of weeks.
That was kind of ominous. We just say Tim's last season.
Yeah. What?
He'll be here until he's in Santorini with you.
I've just found out.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah. So thanks everyone for joining us, and see you in a couple of weeks. All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.